What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I am the host of Epic Conversations and the Dr. Up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe. I'm hearing... Okay, there. I was hearing myself twice there. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, and this is the place of Epic Conversations. No, I'm a certified empowerment coach, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. And it's not Wednesday, but it's Tuesday. But we have Black Lady Magic back again. And if you haven't been here and you haven't checked it out, your wood is wet. So I'm just going to leave it at that. We have Leah, the world traveler from Bolivia. She's on by herself in Bolivia because she kicked out her family. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, I kind of did. No.
Yeah. And we have Dr. Chetachi from good old FLA.
Yes.
You haven't been hit by any of that crazy weather that's been going on there the last 2 weeks, have you?
No, that tropical storm was really on the west coast of Florida, so I don't know why they said on the news. We didn't feel anything, so.
Good. Well, we're glad that both of you are safe, healthy, and looking beautiful as always. So, if you haven't catch their conversations, they've been some of the hottest conversations I've had on the Dr. Vibe show for a long time, and they're making it happen. Tonight, well, last week we tried to do another epic conversation. Leah was having technical challenges. I was having technical challenges, so we just said, cut it. No good. We're back tonight. We're usually Wednesday, but Leah can't make it tonight, so we're on tonight. Leah brought up the conversation topic, the irrational fear of black folk black folk for doing innocuous things. Leah, why you want to talk about this?
I want to talk about it because it's something that I think happens all the time, and just because we live in the age of social media, it's become much more publicly known. But I want to talk about it because it's annoying. So I just feel like I need to have an opportunity to vent. And I also want to talk it out and try to figure out, besides obvious white fear of black people in white spaces or what's perceived to be white spaces, why this keeps happening, and why black people continue to be considered criminal, dangerous, scary, and why white people think the appropriate response when they see someone unfamiliar to them is to call the police instead of just understanding, oh, you might be in a park or in a public space and there's nothing wrong with different people being there. So I wanted to just talk about it because it's freaking annoying.
Well, Dr. Tachi, is it freaking annoying?
Beyond annoying.
Okay.
Beyond, and I don't think, and I was saying this last week, and I say this every day, I don't think people that are non-melanated understand how tiring it gets to be melanated in this country. Just tiring for no reason. And this is not to say that black people specifically, because as we were saying last week, while people of color suffer a lot of these transgressions, a lot of the venom is spewed at black people. And so, black people throughout the diaspora feel it, obviously. But, since we're speaking, these incidents are things that happen in the United States. So it gets tiring to constantly have to look over your shoulder. That's the thing. You have to look over your shoulder and make sure that this is right. That's tiring. And nobody else has to experience that. So, and it's, it's unfair because when in the case of, for example, the park and Barbecue Becky, that's right, I said it. She, what people don't realize is I pay my bloody taxes in this country to be able to use those parks. So if you don't want me there, stop charging me taxes. Stop it, seriously. Because the thing is, I'm paying for you to oppress me? Who does that? In what country is that okay? In what democratic country is that okay? So yes, it's beyond annoying, as you can tell.
Okay. This has been going on for many years. Why do you feel now it's become more of a pressure point, more of a hot issue?
Well, for me, I think it's become more of a pressure point because we're in the age of social media. So when things happen, people now have an immediate avenue or an opportunity to share their story in a wider way. And unfortunately, because these incidences are so prevalent, people are connecting dots. Like, oh my gosh, this BS happened to these men in the park in California. But now, meanwhile, on the East Coast, someone in Yale is falling asleep in the middle of, final season in a dorm, which is probably the most common experience that you can have in college, and is having the cops called on them. And then there's an entire country between those two coasts where these things are happening. And because everybody is so quick to post things on social media, share their experiences, talk about what's going on, there's trends that are becoming linked together. And I also think it isn't just these instances alone. It's also the increased police brutality or the increased visibility of police brutality and death by police and all of these other things that are happening. And we're also at an age now on the heels of the first Black president and also on the rise of Black people in sectors and in different fields where maybe they haven't been seen before or where they haven't risen to higher heights before. I just think there's a new awareness because there's a higher visibility of Black folks, about Black folks.
Dr. Tachi?
I think that also, if we're looking at this honestly, we have an administration in place that has emboldened certain individuals to behave in these ways, whereas before it's always been deplorable, but people maybe did not feel as comfortable doing it. They were still just as racist or still just as closeted racist, deep down racist. It was not okayed. Socially, it was not okayed publicly. But when you have the person who currently calls himself the leader of this country behaving and okaying such behavior, things happen and he'll say things like there's blame on all sides. That emboldens people and okays their racism, okays their bias, okays and not just having the bias, but perpetrating or carrying out the bias. I think that's a large part. In addition to everything that Leah said, I 100% agree. I think that we have an administration that says, oh, this is okay.
And in addition, I agree with you too. And I would add that in addition to okaying it, it's normalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's normalizing the response of, oh, you see a Black person, you don't like it, call the cops. Like that's just a natural instinct instead of, if you really have a concern or a question, approaching that person and asking them or saying something to them, or just accepting that is normal. It's normal to see people barbecuing in a park. It's normal to see people falling asleep in dorms. It's normal to see people moving into apartment buildings, even if the neighborhood is gentrified. If it's gentrified, it means the Black folks were there first.
We were there first.
Y'all did. So how are you going to turn around and call the cops on somebody who was there before you were there? Don't get me going.
No. You got time. Get it going, lady. Get it going.
If I could just add to this, it's interesting when you talk about gentrification and the neighborhood. So obviously, gentrification, let's be clear, does not just mean whites moving into areas that were traditionally Black. That's what it's become to look like, but that's people who were not originally in the neighborhood moving into the neighborhood, usually people with money moving into the neighborhood. Gentrifiers can be Black too, but usually we see it from the other way around, of people from outside Kansas or whatever moving to New York City to East New York and gentrifying there. These are the things that we start to see, or Harlem, and these are the things we start to see. So there's a real live nerve and a gall and an audacity when things are moving into a neighborhood. What the problem is when you're moving into a neighborhood, what happens is many of them don't want to integrate into the fabric of the neighborhood, and which is what makes it so special. They want to turn it into suburbia. They want to turn it into what they're used to without regard for the original inhabitants. And so when that doesn't happen, when they hear Spanish music in Washington Heights, and it's a little too loud for their taste, what happens? They call the cops, or they complain, or they go to Community Board 8 and try to get like what they were. And here's the thing. These outsiders have never had to adjust. We are usually the ones that have to adjust to things. We have to change our behavior for the police. We need to, when we move to certain places, adjust our behavior a certain way. They have not had to adjust, and this is the problem, because they lack flexibility, and they don't think they have to be flexible.
Right, and there's never been a reason to be flexible for them because they have tried to make their way of life the way of life. So
Exactly.
everyone else who doesn't conform to their way of life, we have to be the flexible one in order to survive. The whole thing is, and I agree with you, that if you're moving into my neighborhood and you happen to hear Spanish music or somebody dancing in the street at 3 a.m, well, that's part of the neighborhood. If you didn't want to deal with that, you shouldn't have moved your ass there in the first place. Stay, but don't come back because that is not the nature, the fabric, the history of this neighborhood. Harlem ain't Harlem anymore. East New York isn't East New York anymore. Southeast DC isn't what it used to be. And I'm not saying that some investment, some diversity, some changes aren't for the betterment of the community, especially if it brings in investment dollars and more businesses and better trade and commerce. But if it changes the cultural makeup of the neighborhood, the attitude of the neighborhood, the feeling of the neighborhood, it's not the neighborhood that it used to be. I'm not saying that there's not room for flexibility and change, but not at the cost of what it used to be or the cost of the population that has always been.
And there was no interest in bringing these things there before. It was because usually when you see gentrification, it starts with the artists or it starts with people that have, you know, things as a good investment and have a keen eye and they sit on this property for a long time. And then what happens is slowly those habits are moved. So often it is artists, for example, and then as people are like, oh, artists are there, the businesses start to move in and taxes start to go up. Then the artists can't afford it anymore. Who moves in? The hipsters, the people that have the money to maintain. And so I also blame us in all of this. And I know this is kind of a different topic, but not really. I also blame us because what happens when, okay, DC is a perfect example. There's no way I could afford to live around Howard University anymore. When I was there, it was totally possible, but it has become so gentrified. And what's happened is the people, you know, likely older people that owned the homes around those areas like Southeast DC, Northwest around Howard University, Shaw area, they, you know, either died, the homes went to their stupid grandchildren or their stupid children who were too busy trying to move out to Maryland, as they like to say in the area, and didn't realize the value of that land that they had in the city. The land in the city is so much more valuable than the outskirts. Why? Because the center of everything is in the city. So people want to live and work and shop and do everything in the city. We're seeing this all over the place. It's not just DC, but I noticed a marked difference from the time I left in 2005, and then I had gone back a couple times, but then it had been a while, and then 2013, I got lost because there were so many new buildings. I said, I know this street, but it doesn't look the same. What? I saw cafes and people putting strollers. Again, like Leah says, I think if it's for the betterment of the community, that's great. The issue is you didn't bring it there for the community. You brought it there for the outside people that were coming in.
Exactly.
I want to ask here, how much of this is economics? How much of it is race? Or is it a mixture of both?
Well, if we're talking about the main topic that we're discussing tonight,
Yep.
the irrational fear of Black
Yep.
folks doing innocuous things, that's race. And I think class and, you know, economics does play a role in it because the issues have come in, these calls, these Becky phone calls are coming in when you're seeing people, Black people specifically, in spaces that are not traditionally impoverished. They're in middle income, mixed income areas, elite universities, gentrified communities, which would indicate to me that we're talking about middle to upper income people if it's becoming gentrified, entering into places that might be traditionally or historically white. So the fact that you're there, you deserve to be because your socioeconomic status allows you to be, but because the white folks who are there with you don't expect you to be there, that's where the race factor comes in. Because of your race, they don't expect you to be there, and that's when they call the police. If we're talking about the gentrification issue, we're talking about economics more than racism. I think it becomes a race issue because you're talking about only when you refer to gentrification, it's people going into traditional communities. So it's racial in this sense, white people with means pushing out people of color without means. Mm-hmm. So in that issue, I think it's kind of like they're vice versa. So in the case of the irrational fear, I think it's race with a hint of classism and socioeconomics in there. But in the case of education, I think it's socioeconomic and money with a hint of race.
Dr.
Yes.
Chetachi, you want to add on that?
I agree, 100%. I think the interesting thing, though, just in terms of a little adjustment, is all of this really started because of economics. If you look at things like the slave trade, etc., in order to justify you having more or all, not even more, all of it, you have to find a reason for that. And racism became that reason for, because they're not as accepted us, of course, they made up all sorts of studies to prove that we are not of size, etc., etc. So, the very beginning, they found a way to justify them having because of our inferiority, and that inferiority was based on race. So that, it's almost very difficult to separate the race and the economics part of it, because the economic part of it was based on the thought that we were inferior racially. So it's almost difficult to separate. Now when we look at it, it does seem like it's a somewhat separate issue, but when we go back historically and you look at the roots of it, this is definitely to do with economics. The fact that you could take a whole group of people, make them work for free to build your country, that is a race thing, but you did it because of economics. I seriously doubt they would have been interested in all that hell if there was no money involved.
Yeah, I agree.
Leah, when you look at this from Bolivia, let me slide back. Do you experience any of this in Bolivia?
No, it's different here. And as I was saying in our last talk before we had all those issues, that yes, there are racial issues here. I mean, that's not only a symptom of the United States. I think it's just acute there, but it definitely happens globally. But the difference in Bolivia, and in fact, I think it's a worse problem, and I said this last time, is that the Afro-Bolivian community is negated here. So there is no acknowledgement that there even is an Afro-Bolivian population. And when it is acknowledged, it's acknowledged as in, we're all the same, we're all Bolivian. But meanwhile, the Afro-Bolivians are marginalized. They have less visibility culturally. They are more impoverished than the average Bolivian, and they do struggle more. They're held to different standards in the workplace, which is not unique to Bolivia. We see that with the whole ban of women having locks like that in the military in the United States. They suffer from similar things here, stereotypes and all kinds of things. But I would say we don't deal with the same types of things. There's not an automatic knee-jerk reaction here to call the police if you see an Afro-Bolivian sitting in a nice restaurant. Or if you see an Afro-Bolivian moving to the apartment across the hall from you, they're not going to call the police. That's just not the first line of thinking here. Like if they see someone who they don't recognize in their space, the first thing that they would do is approach the person themselves and be like, hey, are you new? They want to know who you are, and they'll ask you. Now, this doesn't say that there's not racism. There is. It's just different. It's not as insidious as it is in the United States. There is no death by police in Bolivia, for instance. It won't be a fatal interaction if a Bolivian is white, but there is not there's not a situation where if a non-Afro-Bolivian calls the police, that the Afro-Bolivian in this situation could die from that encounter. Whereas in the United States, you can be black doing anything and you can lose your life for it. And that's the scary part. But here, the police apparatus isn't quite the same as the police apparatus in the United States. They do a lot of the same things. But if a policeman is called to a scene or to respond to a call, the people aren't going to die on the other end if they are Afro-Bolivian. So in that sense, it's actually better to be black in Bolivia right now than it is to be black in the United States.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
Yep, but it's the truth, and that makes it sad.
Tachi, well then, taking it to another level, after making that statement, Leah, how does that make you feel having come back to America?
It makes it harder. I mean, we talked a little bit about this offline last time, that one of the benefits to my job is that I get to live and work overseas, and that I have the ability to kind of look from the outward in to the United States and what is happening, even though I consider myself very much a part of the United States because I'm American. But I fear for my children as a Black mother, especially my Black son. We talked a little bit about what happened with Tamir Rice. My son's not that far away from the age that Tamir Rice was when he was slaughtered. So for me, it makes me very fearful of coming back when the people that I look to protect and serve, who my tax dollars go to support, will look at my child as a threat and will shoot before they ask questions. And if they do kill, then they'll be acquitted for their actions. That doesn't feel good as a Black mother. And it makes me feel helpless because I can do nothing to protect my child. And even though we do experience racism overseas, because being Black seems to be a sin everywhere, it's just not the same. I feel like at least raising my children overseas, they have a chance of living to adulthood and being able to operate as a fully functional member of society without fear of being killed in a tragic accident or in an interaction that turns fatal for no other reason than my child is a Black male.
Wow. Tachi, how does it make you feel living in America, hearing that from someone outside of America, and how are you coping with these potential irrational fears?
Well, it's not surprising. So I think that in order to deal with this, if you engage and involve yourself in every single thing, you can go crazy. At the end of the day, you have to think about self-care and self-preservation as well, which is why I know just enough for when I need to run. If I continuously engage in this not just the conversation, even though you need to have the conversation, but engage in the news reports, and it's too much. It really is too much. So you have to think about, especially myself as a journalist, this is part of the reason that I really don't do this type of journalism where I'm mostly doing tech and media and pop culture stuff, because the other stuff is really, I feel for journalists who do that end of it. It's important work, but you really have to think about self-care with that type of thing. It's really disheartening. So I feel I'm not surprised by it. I feel for like Leah and other mothers who have Black children. I feel, and this is the thing, it brings to the forefront that a lot of things, because we say Black mothers, obviously, but there are mothers of other ethnicities who also have Black children, and it's I don't know, but it seems like they are really unprepared to deal with this. They probably never expected to have to deal with this in such a way. And not that anybody wants this, but I think that when you are, for example, a Black mother, you've been given that talk, you know what the deal is, and so you prepare your children accordingly. It's not fair, but that's what happened. I'm sure you prepare accordingly. But if this is not your life at all, and then you have Black children, either you married somebody that is Black or you adopted, this is a new conversation for you. So what people need to realize is this is not just a Black problem. This is an American problem in general. And I think people are not looking at it that way. Whenever things happen to Black people, they see it as a Black problem because somehow we're viewed as less than American. So this is what I'm seeing. So in terms of engaging, like I said, I'm not. This is really the only space where I've been engaging in this conversation because it needs to be had, and I'm glad. But you continuously do that, it can bear on your psyche.
It can. And the one thing that I would add is just that America is my home. I represent and defend America every day in my job, and it is the country that I want to eventually settle back in. But with the way things are now, and as Dr. Tachi was saying earlier about this emboldened nature of certain individuals in the United States as a result of the leader they have elected, I'm just concerned for the interim phase of going back there and living on a regular basis. Thankfully, I'm in a position in life where I think I'm a bit more me. I have a community, I have a network around me, and I can probably protect my children pretty well, but I want to have to live with that level of vigilance. every day to protect my children. But, you know, I'm fortunate that I have the option of being able to choose whether or not I want to go overseas, and that I'm in a field that allows me to go back and forth. And I will always go back and forth. I think even eventually, if I settle back in the United States, I will always live for some period of every year out, just because that's partially who I am. But because of the way things are right now, and not just the things that we've been discussing, but another issue, which could be another conversation for another night, is I'm frankly getting more and more fearful every day of my children going to high school in America with all of these school shootings. So I'm just like, they're happening everywhere, all different types of demographics of kids, different schools, public, private. I'm worried about that too for my children, even though they're still a few years away from being in secondary school. That's another thing that I think of, because, you know, like I said, having the outside perspective looking in and looking globally, this is strictly an American phenomena. I'm not saying there haven't been some school violence, shootings, things like that in other countries. There have, but nothing like experienced in the United States, and it doesn't seem to be stopping, or, you know, the national dialogue that we're having about it doesn't seem to be bringing about any real change. So as a mother, I'm very concerned about this racial gentrification, irrational fear and death by police. I'm equally concerned about having my children being killed by their peers because their peers are experiencing mental health issues, emotional issues, or other things that lead to thinking that the only logical conclusion they can come to is to shoot the school up. So, like I said, that's an issue for another day, but it just sort of adds to feeling that as a mother wishing right by my mind and wanting to protect them, race non-specific, I need to just not be in the United States right now. I really don't.
It's interesting. You bring up a number of conversation pieces there. Divine Right. I think I had mentioned to you two ladies, maybe I didn't. She wants to have a conversation one day, and you bring up this subject of how do we explain to our children what's going on, these mass shootings. Like, and you're a mother and you're coming back into the United States, and obviously it's a concern for you, just the school environment. What's going to happen with that?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think a lot of it is going to start with our elected officials doing something about making the ability to gain access to guns different. And I think there's to be another conversation about how best to support our teens and how best to give them coping skills and how best to identify when we think someone might be suffering or be a victim of abuse that could be skewing their perception of reality. There's multiple conversations that we need to be having, but more than the conversations, it needs to spur action. And I think that we always get stuck in the United States, not just on school shootings, but on major societal issues. We get stuck in the conversation phase until that's superseded by the next issue, and then everything is just forgotten about and we remain with status quo. So it just means that everything can happen again. There is nothing that has moved the needle in any direction to bring about a different outcome. So for me, I don't know what it will take to make a difference, but it's going to require real conversation with all parties at the table with real tangible results at the end that are actionable and actually action is taken on them.
We'll save
But I don't know how to get to that point.
We'll save for another conversation. But a few things. Want to shout out to MC Curtis, who's producer of Tatiana's epic conversation on Wednesday evenings at 5 p.m. on Instagram Stories, and 6 o'clock on Facebook Live and Periscope. Yeah, I keep it up. So thanks, Dr. Tachi. You mentioned something that's very interesting, and I think it relates a lot to this topic. The whole aspect of blacks having to be concerned and girded up about self-preservation. When you hear with all these reports, it makes me feel that self-preservation is as much a concern now as it was back in the civil rights days and before the civil rights days.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, self-preservation and / self-care is, the self-care part of it has never really been part of the conversation. To be honest, I'm just now starting to hear about we have to take care. And here's the thing. It's the self-care part has been taken out because, largely due to religion. Many of us tend to be very very religious. There are some of us that are not. But, historically, we tend to be very heavily Christian in this country, right? And so because of that, we tend to think, well, all we need is Jesus and we'll be okay. Therefore, we don't take care of the mental health aspect of it. We don't try to atone. We don't do any of that because we fit to the higher power. Well, what's the saying? God helps those who help themselves. And there are mental health professionals that have been put here on earth for our use, but because of our history of always having to be strong and needing to be strong and overcome adversity, that self-care part of it has been taken out for some reason, and we still continue that. The strong Black people, nothing hurts. Yes, things do hurt us. We just have been taught not to show it, or we're taught to squash it, or told by society we need to squash it and get over and forgive, and that's the big thing. So to your point, the self-care part of it has been taken up, but yes, we're still trying to maintain just as much as did when we were brought to this country. It's a never-ending struggle. There's never been a time you can't rest. I think that's the tiring thing. When you can never rest. You can never just be. I keep bringing up an example of going to Howard University, and part of going to Howard was that I could be not a Black student, but be a student. I was like, hey, gads, do I always have, it is so tiring. And so I think I'm tired now talking about it. I'm just like exhaling as I'm talking about it, because the whole thing is really just very tiring. So there's no rest when you're Black in this country, even if you think you want. And it's interesting. Lawrence Otis Graham, who wrote Our Kind of People, and wrote another, I can't remember the second book, but he is an author and a journalist, and he lives in the DC area and was talking about, and I actually had the pleasure of interviewing him, and he talked about the fact that how he thought by living out in the suburbs and doing this and being in this organization and that organization, that he was able to shelter children from all what was going on. And he had a rude awakening when the police stopped his son. He was on the way. Now, he had that talk of, okay, when they be respectful, and in this day and age, it doesn't matter. You could be as respectful, and you may end up dead. So it's interesting to hear that all the things that we thought would protect us and preserve us, getting an education, dressing in a certain way, going to certain schools, doing the way society said we thought would preserve us, don't matter. So that's also disconcerting.
Anything you want to add to that, Leah?
Like always, I agree with everything Dr. Tachi said, because she's right on point as usual. And I agree with her. I think the problem, and as she said in the beginning too, she blames us a little bit for the predicament that we find ourselves in, and so do I. And I feel the same way about self-care, because I think buy into our own hype and our own stereotypes that we're strong, we're perseverant, we can overcome, we shall overcome, we have overcome. So we don't take care of ourselves in the way we need to, but we put our faith in a higher power. We put our faith in just our ability to overcome and our resilience. But meanwhile, Black people are getting, we still have the worst rates of every disease imaginable. We have, women who die much more frequently from childbirth than any other. We have a higher prevalence of many other diseases that are, and we don't go to medical professionals. We don't get checked out. And by the time we do, it's too late. If we had gone to the doctor when we had our first, twinge of something was wrong, totally treatable, problem solved, you're good to go. You go to fight another day. We wait until the last minute when we find out we have stage 4 cancer, ain't nothing you can do about it, and you're about to be dead. And that seems to be a widespread problem that we have in our community. And I don't know, I can't blame society for that anymore, because we've been around long enough to know there are doctors, there are resources, there are clinics, there are people, healthcare professionals out there available to us. We have them in our own community. We produce them, yet we still don't go to them. And so I don't understand where the disconnect is between our fear of establishments and our need to be healthy. I really wish that we would feel like it's okay to pamper ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to say no to things, to rest when we need to put something aside when it doesn't serve us. We don't do those things, and I don't understand why, and I really can't put the blame on society or other communities or non-melanated people for that, because we're savvy and intelligent enough, we've been around enough to know these things exist. We don't take advantage of them. I don't know why.
Can I add to that, Dr.
Yeah,
Vibe?
absolutely.
And I agree that we are to blame for some of this, but I will say this, that there was an article written recently about, and these are people that know, that are, that have money or that are educated enough, and often medical professionals don't listen to us. So, for example, with Black women, there was an article, tennis player, help me.
Serena Williams.
Yeah.
Yep.
Serena Williams, she just had a baby, and she's had problems walking in her legs. So she could tell something was not quite right, and she kept telling them. She had to yell at them to get them to get her the right medication that she needed. Now, that's only because she was savvy and knew when it had happened before. Imagine the women that are not moneyed, that don't have the education, they will just die. And that's often because medical professionals don't believe when we say we're in pain because of that strong Black woman thing. We've been so strong. It's almost as if they feel we don't feel pain or we're exaggerating. So we're not listened to by the medical community.
True.
And a big part of that because they lack training. They lack training in communication. They lack training in mediation. All they are is trained and not educated. Now, unfortunately, sorry to say, and that's not every medical professional, but there are many, actually the ones that are not melanated and are not used to dealing with the melanated community, that take our cries about pain and such for granted. And so they're not well trained, and that is the fault of the institutions that they're coming out of. So I blame you, Yale School of Medicine. I blame you, all the schools that these places are people are coming out of. That's your fault if they're not coming out with the compassion and the skills that they need.
Yeah, that's true. I have to agree with that, and add one small point is it is a situation where I think there's blame to go on all sides, and I totally agree with Dr. Chetachi in that for whatever reason the medical establishment seems to think that when we go in and say that we have a pain, we're either exaggerating, we don't know what we're talking about, we're not credible. And the way in which we receive medical care and the treatment that is prescribed is different. They seem to think we have a higher threshold for pain. They don't give us the same medications. It is interesting. So, I guess there are some historical reasons as to why the Black community maybe doesn't feel heard or understood when they actually do seek medical treatment. But I still think that there is a little bit of responsibility there, that even if they aren't heard, you keep going back and you keep telling them until you find someone who hears you and you get the treatment that you need. Just because you have a few bad experiences with someone who is, tone deaf and can't hear you or doesn't empathize or is not compassionate, find a doctor who is, or go to your own damn doctors. We got Black doctors in our community. Another thing that frustrates me is within the Black community, this is a criticism of us, we seem to feel like our own doctors or our own lawyers or our own leaders are less credible somehow than their non-melanated counterparts. And I don't understand that either. I'm like,
white ice is colder.
Right. Bingo. So anyway, sorry, I know Dr. Bob did get in there, but
no. I'm just steering the ship. You ladies are driving big time tonight. What do you feel the fear is based on that some people have of us?
It's created. This fear is, you have to go back and again, I point to the economic part of it. It's fear of what is different, but then you exacerbate those fears for your own gain. So I'm well within my rights to discriminate against you if there is a valid reason to do so, and that's because you all are people to be feared. You've shown over and over that you don't behave well, that you're this, that you're that, and so their fear is rationalized. So, Dr. Vibe, could you ask a question again? I've gone into a whole thing because I'm like...
No, you're on fire tonight. No, I'm just saying, For those who fear us, what do you think? And these people are calling on blacks who are just living their lives. What do you feel that their fear is based upon?
Lies. Their fear is based. That's why it's irrational. If it was rational, there would be some modicum of truth to it, and often there is not. They're based off. Okay, it's based off of I will say lies, but fabricated perceptions of things that they see in media. Okay, and I never say the media because the media indicates that it is one conglomerate doing everything, and that's not so. There are different media outlets. So images that they see in media, and this is from early on, the stereotypes that were put out there. The biggest piece of propaganda that instilled fear in the heart of America was Birth of a Nation, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation in 11? I can't remember exactly. But that was propaganda. That film alone caused the KKK membership to increase tenfold, probably even more than that. And so you can point to that as an example of how media has instilled this irrational fear of those that are different, but particularly Black people, in the hearts and in the minds of the populace. So I think is largely responsible for it, but I can't just blame media. I also blame sheeple. People who are so willing to be led and don't want to think critically because it's too hard to do so. It's easier to be told the messages and internalize them rather than to investigate for oneself. I always ask people when they tell me, well, do you check another source? Whenever you hear this, you need to check at least 3 sources and chances are 3 people are not going to be wrong, but most people don't. So there is a banking on the fact that most people are not going to check things out, because the average person is a sheeple, or a sheep person, and they're just going to go along with the status quo. So that's my estimation of it: the fact of laziness and not wanting to find out the truth, and media outlets stirring up stereotypes and putting them out there as truths. Fox News. Sorry, go ahead.
Leah.
Yes. Everything she said, and I also think it's a fear of change to the status quo. Because in addition to the stereotypes that are, promulgated in media, and not just in news media. I mean, news media is just one where the stories that they choose to highlight are, the black mugger, or this carjacking, or more black on black violence. And that's the only narrative that they put out there. They don't show the black excellence stories. They don't show these students who got accepted every single Ivy League institution with full scholarships. They don't show those pieces. We don't see positive images of Black people in popular culture. Now, this is changing with shows like Blackish, Grownish, things like that, but that's only recent. Those shows are only in their first few seasons. But and only one show is not going to counter this narrative that's been going on since Birth of a Nation and before. But I also think Chetachi well covered the media piece. Status quo. The status is that we've always been relegated, subjugated as second-class citizens and not citizens, or three-fifths of a person for most of our existence in this country. So now that we're starting to show up in numbers to positions, fields, parts of the country, different neighborhoods where we historically have not been, it's shaking things up, and the status quo doesn't like that, because that means that they may have to relinquish some of that power, relinquish some of that control, relinquish some of what they have and what they've gotten through ill-gotten means, through slavery and penalty of slavery, and now we're starting to get back some of that. Now they're rebelling against it, because now it's not so easy to justify the maintenance of their position in society as being top dog, because now we're starting to get into those upper echelons, and we're starting to be in positions of influence and authority ourselves. And status quo doesn't like that, because it runs directly counter to the status quo.
And it disproves their theory of why they have. They have because they're superior. No, you have because you usurped power. There are so many mediocre people at the top. And, this is disproved because if the people who you said are less than are now getting to those positions because they actually deserve it, then it calls into question, your intellect. It calls into question your ability, which, again, like you said, they don't like.
Yep. And also, one little tidbit to add to, it also shows that despite all of these hurdles that people of color face to reach those upper echelon levels that people have just inherited, it calls them into question. They need to look at themselves, because we've been able to excel, thrive, and build and rise, and you were just given that position because your daddy got it for you. And so now we're there and we are much better than you are, and that frightens them because that means they actually have to put in work, put in effort, show what they're worth, and now they might be tested and they might be found wanting. And if we're put a mirror in their face, they don't want that reminder, and they don't want to lose what they've gotten through nothing other than nepotism. So there's a lot.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about income, monetary. It's a few weeks ago I had a gentleman named Alfred Young Jr. on. He's written a book called Are Black Men Doomed? And it was a very conversation. One of the things I'll never forget, he said, when it comes to many black people have income, but they don't have wealth.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
And I think, that's another fear. Like, there's so many fears that many black people, like the daily survival, economic survival, spiritual survival, mental health survival, so many fears. It seems that things are compounded as time goes on. Instead of things moving forward, they're moving backward, and even scarily, even more backward. You can't even walk out of your house with someone calling you, calling the police on you.
It's true.
Exactly.
One of the things that's upsetting to me that you mentioned just now, Dr. Vibe, and something that I'm also trying to figure out is, despite the fact that, African Americans are at a point in life where we are getting wages and starting to get this type of salaries that would allow us to accumulate and build wealth, like in cases, my generation might be generation zero in terms of actually having something to pass down to my children and inheritance. I think it's taken all these generations to get to the point where now Black people are in positions where they can start building that generational wealth and not just have income, but also create the wealth that they need to pass down. And it's unfortunate because I think that we really are the first generation to be able to create that. And I'm not talking about NBA, NFL athletes. I'm talking about average Americans.
Well, it just came to my head. Some African Americans have a fear of other African Americans.
Yeah.
Why?
Lots of things. It kind of goes back to what I was saying before about how we discredit our own. Like, when you're sick, people who have this attitude would rather go find a white doctor than a Black doctor who have the same qualifications, same ability to diagnose, same ability to write a prescription, because they somehow feel like the white doctor is more credible. And so I feel like there's that, but then there's also the fear of, I think some Black people have also bought into the same stereotypes that have been perpetuated, and they believe the hype. They believe that we are a danger to ourselves. They believe that we are violent. They believe that we are inherently, wanting to be in gangs and want to mug and rob each other. People believe that. People do believe that about other Black people. It's because I think they've been brainwashed. They're the sheeple that Dr. Chetachi was talking about earlier. That color line. They believed into the hype that's been perpetrated out there and somehow can't see or don't want to see that that's not true. It might be certainly not for the entire community. It's not a monolith.
Dr. Chetachi, what do you think about that conversation piece? Are some African Americans have a fear of other African Americans?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think I agree with everything that Leah said, as per usual. I think that that's something that has been cultivated, and we've been drinking the Kool-Aid in Georgetown, Guyana, and we 100%. There are many of us that 100% believe it. I keep remembering that I would always hear back in the day, this is 1990 such and such. We can't afford to be afraid of our own people anymore, which means that there is a fear there, and you keep hearing that. You keep hearing that in terms of, okay, not wanting to go in certain, and now let's be clear. I believe in safety. I think it's foolishness to put yourself in harm's way. And there are clearly things that are harmful in our communities. We know where they come from and we know why, but you don't have time to sit there and deconstruct why when there are bullets whizzing by. So you don't put yourself in harm's way. But I think there is this irrational fear that has been instilled in some of us. This is why we're in such a hurry to get away from ourselves, whether it's our neighborhoods, and to go someplace else, because we've been taught that black is anti-progress, or anything that's black is not progressive. Therefore, in order to be progressive, in order to excel, you need to divorce yourself from blackness somehow. Whether it is, shopping in certain places, living in certain places, etc. That being said, I don't think it makes any sense. We're like Lisa, we're not a monolith. I don't think you have to, simply because you're black, need to stay in the community. I'm not saying that, but I think that for some people moving out of there is this irrational fear, which is the reason not only that they moved out of there, maybe their parents moved out of there, but the that they won't set foot there, or their children won't set foot there, or move back there, or even try and help and establish there.
And the fear is also that I think that some black people want to be the opposite of what the stereotypes are that are perpetuated, so they're afraid of being lumped in with those black people, the ones that are portrayed negatively, and so they away from themselves because they want to disassociate themselves from the stereotype. And so by doing that, they neglect or negate those people who you meet the stereotype, and so they do that by being black gentrifiers, making money and sending their kids to all white schools, moving to suburbia, not looking back, not reaching back to help lift up. Those are the people who are afraid, but they're afraid of being considered or seen by larger society as a stereotypical black person.
Help me, just take a journey with me. I'm going to bring in a subject, and I'm going to attempt to loop it in with this conversation tonight. Integration. I've had many a conversation on the Dr. Vibe show at Home of Epic Conversations. I have a number of people who are of color saying that integration has not been the thing for Black African Americans. Looking at the fear aspect, has integration lessened the fear or increased the fear, in your opinion?
Of black people?
Yes.
Well, so let me go back. Leah, is it okay if I?
No, take it. Go first.
Okay. So one of my professors at Howard University, Dr. Richard Wright, I remember we were having this conversation in African American communication. That was something that all Masters and Ph.D. students needed to take. So we have these types of conversations in class, which I miss so much. And somebody said, something about, like, after integration, he said there's no such thing. There was desegregation. There was never a really, truly integration. And that's always stuck with me when he said that. I'm like, you're right. It was desegregation as opposed to integration. So you're asking, did this whole process of desegregation, or the fact that we can now sit next to you at a lunch counter or shop in these stores, did that increase the fear? I think maybe for some, definitely, because now, like Leah has been saying, we're in spaces we're not expected to be. And so you already have this irrational fear, but now this irrational fear is not hidden by Jim Crow or laws that keep us away from you. Now you're faced with us. And so that to me is the Backyard Becky or Barbecue Becky reason to call the police. We're in a space that you don't expect us to be, because that's what segregation did. It said that we can now sit here, we could go here, it said it is unlawful to prevent people from doing that. It didn't mean that people stopped. 100%. And to this day, you could still see examples of those types of things and small microaggressions. Not necessarily in terms of a sign saying don't come here, but in the way that you're treated and things like that are basically saying don't come here. like that store in Starbucks in Philadelphia, etc. So, it could. So yes, to an extent, I do think that created it because it caused us to be in spaces right next to the non-melanated, and they weren't expecting it, and it caused them to be fearful.
Before you go add on to that, Leah, I want to dig deep with Dr. here. You said the word expect us. Is it an expect piece, or do they not want us?
They didn't expect it, they didn't want.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
Both. And I don't want to say everyone. I can't.
I agree. Understood. Not everyone. I agree. Leah, what would you like to add on?
I would just add on the flip side, because of course everything she said I agree with and is on point, but I also think that in addition to increasing the fear, though, I also think it was positive in the sense that the only way that people can learn about one another is to learn about one another through direct interaction. So in order to counter the stereotypes, you have to be exposed to people who are different than you so that you can learn firsthand that there are many people, and the majority of Black people are not the stereotype that is perpetuated. And the only way to do that is to have direct interaction and be sharing experiences, sharing space with people that are different than you. Otherwise, you have nothing to compare to. When you hear one narrative being preached at you, there's no way for you to learn what is real unless you're actively involved in trying to get to know Black people or learn that there are different people out there. So I kind of feel like, although I agree with the thing that Dr. Chetachi said, that it wasn't necessarily integration, but rather just desegregation, I do think that in many ways, the act of exposure, being exposed to something different every day, all the time, it doesn't necessarily guarantee complete understanding, but at least it starts to desensitize people to only knowing what the stereotype has been, because now they have this counter narrative. And they can, one person is very much like me. Oh, they still want the same things in life. They want good schools. They want their kids to thrive and be wonderful. They want to have a meaningful and fulfilling career. And they realize only through this exposure and interaction that not that different after all.
You know what, though? I'm sorry, just to add really quickly.
Yeah,
I think, though, we also, in some cases, I get the feeling that those people that they encounter that are different are the exception. So somehow it's like, she's the exception. And again, this is not for everybody, as opposed to the rule, which is all other Black people. And so often, if there's no incentive for somebody that is non-melanated to have to be among. There are several who do put themselves in situations so that they are around different people, but several that are not. And you can see this, case in point, when you look at writing for television, etc. When you look at the images that are in television, you have to visit. You mean I have to have a diversity person to tell you, what? This role doesn't have to be a white person. You could actually, I never thought of that, because they never have to think about it. This is why always the diversity officers, this is why always the ones charged with having to think about those things, because they never have to think about it, which leads me to believe in some cases it's like, okay, this person of color that I've come across, or this Black person I've come across, some people be thinking, well, this is good because other people are like this Black person that I know, or they could be thinking this is the exception. So it's like a catch-22.
It's true, you're right. I do think that, at least in my case, and this has come up in prior conversations that we've had, I've always felt like I've been treated like the exception to the rule, like I'm the token. And so, it's like, where I grew up, it was also homogenously white. I was the only person of color there, including in my own family. And I remember hearing on more than one occasion from the parents of my white friends, they would be like, Black people are like this, except for Leah. Or,
yes.
Every Black person is like that, except for Leah. But they knew me. But I was the only one that they knew. But as Dr. Chetachi said, instead of looking at me as the rule, I was the exception. And I was the exception because I was the one that they accepted and knew. But I'm like, well, if you could get to know me and accept me, then why can't you get to know and accept other people and realize that it isn't just Leah. It's not the exception. There are many people like me. And as I said before, and Dr. Chetachi reiterated, we're not a monolith. We are not all of this stereotype. It's the same, that same stereotype of, the welfare, strong Black woman or angry Black woman, and the thug or, the gang member is really the main stereotype that's been perpetuated over time and is popularly held.
Well, one of your biggest fans, this lady's a fan of both of you. I speak with her frequently, and she says that Dr. Tachi and Leah are my heroes. Deborah, I won't give her last name, but she just sent me a text, and she followed up in regards to my conversation piece about how some African Americans / blacks have a fear of other blacks. And she mentioned a gentleman that she knows that she says he doesn't like dealing with blacks because he feels that they're not professional, not punctual,
See, that's
not
what I was saying.
And they're unreliable. So he has a fear of them.
So it's crazy because when you sit down and think about it, I'm sure you could point to many non-melanated people that are professional, that are not punctual, and people are people when it comes to certain things. And so I hate that when we put a yardstick up to own that we don't use to measure anybody else.
Say it again. Say it again.
We put a yardstick, or in the Canadian and everybody else's case, a meter stick up to our own that we don't use to measure anybody else, and we expect to have it perfect all the time. And if we don't, see, black folks, this is why I don't deal with them. We always do that. We don't do it with anybody else, but that's part of that. Is part of what's been ingrained in, unfortunately, to expect something to leak because it's black.
Exactly. It's what I was saying earlier when we were talking about the fear of people. And I said it's twofold. One is the lack of trust and the fact that we seem to hold our own to a higher standard. So if we're anything less than perfect, then it's because we're black and we ain't right. But we don't do the same thing to the white folks that we seek services or assistance from. And the other is the fear is to not be characterized as the stereotype. So we do everything in power to not be that. So we run away from that because we don't want to be lumped in or classified as the stereotypical black person. It's one of the two usually when I think of blacks fearing other blacks.
Yeah, exactly. Curtis Brooks is saying about that man, that's too bad for him. And he says, right, totally agree, Dr. You're on it.
She is. She always is.
And Deborah's saying that's what I told him. Exactly what both of you were saying. He told this gentleman. So she is in agreement with her heroes.
Oh.
So
wonderful.
Sweet.
Well, ladies, I think I'm gonna call this another epic conversation again. As always, just are on fire. And any closing? I'd like to get closing comments on this conversation piece. You know, what would you like to share with our would you say non-melanated audience, and then our melanated audience? So I'll have Dr. Tachi first on this. Leah brought the conversation. How she lead first.
Well, first of all, thank you both again for another epic conversation. I think to both melanated and non-melanated audiences, I want to say, well, okay, first for, our melanated, we have to start to realize and understand what we have, the power that we have, and to understand that we are not to reduce ourselves to stereotypes and to believe in them, because we've done it for too long. And if now to show you this is time to believe in ourselves, I don't know when will. Also, to think about this, if you are consistently being disrespected, why would you be disrespected? Or businesses and things that continuously, somebody's calling the police, don't go there. This is why, it shouldn't take for these type of things for us to value what we have. And why does it matter? This is not to say you can't go into any business you want, but it matters because it's about building wealth, as we were talking about before. You don't have wealth to build, hand down to the next generation if you're not supporting these businesses, or they don't have it to hand down. So if you're being disrespected, I don't understand why you continue to spend money where you're being disrespected, because we have professionals in our community that can serve you just as well. And to the non-melanated community, stop being lazy and do the work. There is no excuse in 2018 for you not to know that people like Dr. Vibe, Leah, and myself are the norm. There are non-norms within our community, but we're not a monolith. Just like there are problems in black communities are varied and wide, and black people believe in different things. We hold different values, and sometimes we value the same things. So the fact that you don't know that, there's no excuse. I'm sorry, I'm not giving you a pass, and I'm also not going to educate you, because the same Google that is available to you, to me, to look things up, is also available to you and was invented by you. Therefore, I urge you, that was my motto last year. I'm not helping you in 2017 when there's a Google. I further am not helping you in 2018 when there is a Google. Now, this is not to say that, people that really have questions and they're really interested in learning, of course, but for people who just don't want to do the work and rather lay in stereotypes, I'm not going to do that. So don't expect us to do the work for you. Be excellent, because this is what we're trying to be. So you do the work as well.
Leah?
There's not much more that needs to be said, but but all I'll add for the melanated folk is that continue with your life. Don't let anybody stop you, even if Becky's going to call on you. Still go and excel and thrive. Go to the park and have your barbecues. If you need that coffee, go to the Starbucks. Continue to be great in institutions of higher learning. And don't be afraid to live your life. Don't let this stop your joy or block you from the things that you deserve in life, especially as a tax-paying citizen. As Dr. Chetachi said, if you're going to pay for it and you want to do it, then go ahead and do it. Knowing that there's going to be a Becky there, they might call on you, but you have just as much right to be there as anybody else, and don't let them take that away from you. You've earned it, you deserve it, it's your right as well. And to the non-melanated folks, I agree with everything that Dr. Chetachi said, and also I would just say to stop it, because your knee-jerk reaction to call the police can end in the death of an innocent individual just because you're stupid. So think of other ways to handle situations, do the work, stop relying on stereotypes, stop listening to everything Fox News says as gospel, and get out there and actually take a better critical analysis of your world and get to know somebody else a little different from you, or at a minimum ask questions. Does the stereotype make sense to you? It clearly doesn't, because not everyone is the same. And like Dr. Chetachi said, I'm really done with this topic. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of teaching white people that black people are not the same, that we're different, and that the norm is actually black excellence, but you choose to not see that because you're afraid of what black excellence means, and the fact that your time in leadership positions and in the spotlight is coming to an end.
Well done, ladies. Not only well said, but well done. I'll go first off with Dr. Tachi. If people want to find out more about you, what can they do? Where can they go?
Oh, so I love Twitter. I am at Tachiada, Tachiada. You can also find me very heavily on Instagram. I am Dr. Tachi, and I do a show every Wednesday called Mediascope. Thank you. I talk about all things media, tech, and pop culture. Me and Peanut Gallery, who is Dr. Vibe, is involved in that, and MC Curtis, who is the producer. We have a bunch of fun. So it's 5 p.m. Eastern time. On the pre-show is on Instagram Live, then we hop onto Facebook Live and Periscope at 6 p.m. and that's on the Mediascope page on Facebook, and Periscope is at Tachiada, just like my Twitter handle.
Yes, and if you're watching this live, this is being broadcast live on June the 5th. It's tomorrow night, so be there. Leah, how can people touch base with you?
So for me, I am active across all social media. Pretty much you can find me at Leah World Traveler everywhere. I have my own blog. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, Pinterest, everywhere. On Twitter, you can find me as Leah World Travels, because Traveler was too many characters. So you can find me there on Twitter, Leah World Traveler, Leah World Travels, and Leah World Traveler everywhere else.
Wonderful. And she's being very low level. After the ditched conversation last week, we had a long conversation. You need to check out what Leah's doing. She's doing a lot. She's awesome. She's doing she's taking it low
Thank
key.
you.
She shared with myself and Dr. Tachi all the stuff we were doing. And Dr. Tachi and I were just looking at each other going, where did this all come from? We know nothing. We don't know a thing.
I
So,
just didn't share. I'm learning to share.
all right. Well, there you go. So support
But check me out. You'll see what I'm doing. It's a lot. Like I
yes.
said.
So we call it Black Lady Magic. And we'll be back on soon. For myself, I'm Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations. If you want to check out replay on YouTube, you're at the place. If you want to catch up my audio, Epic Conversations, go to the website, thedrvibeshow.com. There's also Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, Google Play Music Store, iHeartRadio. And selected conversations can be heard on thegoodmenproject.com and WJMS Radio out of Chicago. And we're working on a new platform so you can listen to the Dr. Vibe show. I'm just going to say 2 letters, AI, and I'm going to leave it at that. Brand ambassador for the only online magazine dedicated to African Americans in food, wine, and travel. The name of the magazine is Cuisine Noir. Website address is cuisinenoirmag.com. Certified empowerment coach, president and CEO of Express Your Vibe Coaching and Communications. If you'd like a complimentary empowerment session, reach out to me via Twitter at drvibeshow. Email address dr.vibe@the drvibeshow.com, or you can go to my website, click on Contact the Dr. Vibe Show, and you can contact me the audio, video message, or email right from my website. If you are an entrepreneur or business and you're looking for media promotion, please come contact me. I run a service called Express Your Vibe, getting media coverage. Simple. That's what we do. Get media coverage so we can enhance your business, product, or service. And finally, Monday nights at 9 p.m. at the Dr. Vibe Show in collaboration with the Good Men Project. I'm doing a number of conversations until the end of July right now about CTE. And people, what's CTE? Well, many ex-football players are suffering brain damage, and some, unfortunately, are committing suicide because of this damage as a result of playing football. So we are doing a number of conversations about that. 3 last things I'd like to say. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Next up, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. And finally, block assumptions. I'd also like to thank MC Curtis. Thank you for your support. And Deborah, who watched her 2 heroes tonight. And she just sent a text saying, on fire. What? To both of you. So God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. And as they say where I have heritage from, walk good. We'll be back soon when Leah finally gets everything organized. So God bless, peace be well, and keep the faith. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching live or on the replay.
Bye.